Hello, it's Jack Tutor here of Attention Magazine. Welcome to Crucial Listening, the podcast where I speak with musicians and sound artists about 3 albums that are important to them. My guest this time is Sarah Hennies, who is a composer based in New York, whose work, in her own words, is concerned with a variety of musical, socio-political and psychological issues including queer and trans identity, love, intimacy, psychoacoustics and percussion. I've been enjoying Sarah's work for quite a few years now, and I think the first thing that really drew me into her music was just how it rewards persistence. There's so much to gather from Sarah's music. She often uses ideas which seem to be on the surface compositionally simple, but then reveal themselves to be inexpressibly complicated, simply by unraveling over time. The things that they tell you about the room in which you're situated, the room that the instruments are situated in, the tonal construct of the instruments themselves, reverberation, just the dynamic between listening and time. There's so much to gather, and whenever I've reviewed Sarah's music, I've only been able to get some of it down because I could go on, but also there's a certain aspect of the experience which, like all amazing experiences, just falls slightly outside of reach of what I can really conjure into words. I'm still trying. So Sarah picked some wonderful records, and you can find out more about Sarah's own music and her own wonderful records at sarah-hennies.com. You can find out more about this episode at attentionmagazine.co.uk/crucial listening, where there's also information about Sarah's picks and links to her own music as well. And that's enough preamble. This is a really lovely conversation. It was so great to speak to Sarah. I hope you enjoy it. This is Sarah Hennies on Crucial Listening. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to Crucial Listening.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. How are you doing?
Good.
So thank you so much for coming on the show today and bringing 3 important albums with you as well. Before we get into the choices that you've come with today, I wanted to ask about how your 2019 is going so far. I understand you've been doing quite a lot of travel and quite a few shows. So how's it all been?
Yeah, it's been mostly great. It's been very, very exhausting. I've really been going kind of nonstop with both performing and composing since about last September. Really with like a very little break, even at Christmas and New Year's. It was like I was in South Carolina for a recording session 3 days before Christmas.
Wow.
and then like moving at the same time, and just it's been a really, really nuts but really great several months. I had been working full-time in offices since I finished grad school, which was over 15 years ago. So I've just become an honest-to-God full-time self-employed musician a little less than a year ago. So it's been really great. I'm really like working my ass off, but feels good.
Wow. So how's it been for that first year? I mean, has your relationship with making music changed now you'll be able to make that your kind of primary focus for the day?
It's only changed in that everything just kind of feels better.
Right.
It's like the amount of time it takes me to like make a new piece is much shorter. 'Cause I'm not tense and stressed out from having been at work all day. And, I don't know. I feel overwhelmed and like I'm on overdrive, but it's not as far as like the actual making of stuff. It's seemingly, I wouldn't say I have unlimited energy for it, but I have a lot.
Right.
It was like, I think I came back from Los Angeles maybe a month ago, and I was just like, yes, I do indeed have a limit, and we have found it. I had a week or 2 off after that concert, and then I've got some time off now. I was gone for almost all of February in a few different places, and then in Scandinavia for 2 weeks. And so it really has been like truly great, but I also am truly exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah, it must be great to have this fortnight just to reset before you get on a plane again, huh?
Yeah, and it's there. I don't have any more of these like. Well, I'm leaving for 3 weeks on the 15th, but in the middle week of that is a vacation with my partner in Italy. So
lovely.
It's not like a 3-week tour or anything. It's I get an honest to God vacation because the soonest that we could take our honeymoon after we got married was 2.5 years later.
I find with those, it's either the next week or it's, it is that far down the line, isn't it?
Yeah, but it'll be really fun. And then I'm going to Chicago for a week right after that, and then I'll be off more or less most of the time for probably the rest of the year.
So you are coming over to the UK quite soon. In fact, by the time this comes out, you will have been to the UK.
Yeah, I'm excited. I was supposed to come to the Audiographed Festival in Oxford last year, actually, but I couldn't because of my job, because I had been taking so much time off, and I had been in Sweden not long before that. And I was like, well, I can't come, but will you invite me next year? And then they did. So now I'm coming.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I really like Patrick Farmer quite a lot, and we've never actually met in person, so I'm really excited to come over.
And you are bringing Gather and Release that you're going to be playing at Audiographed?
Yeah, I'm going to play that at Audiographed, and then I'm playing a few other shows at London, Birmingham, and Bristol, where I'm going to play a different, shorter piece, also for vibraphone, but that involves a bunch of audience members doing this kind of simple bell ringing part.
Nice. Yeah, in fact, I think I saw you doing a call out for people online there.
Yeah, exactly. It's the sort of ensemble parts are really, really easy to play, and it's very quick to put together, but the results are really beautiful.
And with Gather and Release, I mean, as I understand, that's a work that's been recorded and out for a couple of years. I mean, it's cool to see that that's a piece that you're still playing and still interacting with. How has that been? Have you felt your relationship with that piece changing over the course of, playing it over the course of several years?
Not exactly. It's not like this piece of mine, Contralto, where I've been presenting it like basically constantly. It's more when the album was new, I was playing it, kind of a lot, but again, I had a job, so it wasn't at the level of frequency that I am now. And I still I don't think when I play it now, I still feel the same excitement that I felt when I first made it. And I try not to play the same thing twice in the same city. So I haven't been to England in 4 years. So I still felt like that's kind of like really the strongest solo performance that I have to offer. So I really wanted to do that for Audiographed.
And I think I read about, and in fact I heard when I was listening to the piece, that involves this, I can't remember the name of the technique, but a technique that's used in trauma therapy?
Oh, yeah, the therapy is called EMDR, but there's this alternating clicking sound on about half of the album called bilateral stimulation.
That's it.
It's a component of this weird type of talk therapy.
Yeah, how did that find its way into the composition?
I had several years ago, probably 10 years ago now, I had done this EMDR therapy because my regular therapist recommended it. And it's hard to explain briefly like what all is entailed in this, but there is always some kind of outside element of some regular alternating thing, either someone like tapping on your knees or a light moving back and forth or a sound moving back and forth that is constant throughout the therapy. And I remember the guy who was doing this for me at the time telling me that he was like, oh, you can do this tapping on yourself. It's like a relaxation tool. Just don't try to do EMDR therapy on yourself. But he was like, yeah, when I'm holding my daughter, I'll tap on her back like this. And I made this track of this. It's a sample I made of one single clave strike that I made into this alternating thing, and it sat on my computer for probably more than 5 years. And then, I hoped that I would use it in a piece one day. And then when I was working on Gather and Release, I realized that was the moment.
And in terms of the live presentation of that piece as well, I mean, how easy has it been to transpose that piece into something that works within a performance context?
It actually works really well, which is part of the reason that I still really like to play it, because it's not like a lot of my older work where it's really dependent on me having like a certain kind of acoustic or space to play in. I mean, there's types of rooms that I prefer, but it really is just an unamplified vibraphone and then pressing play on an iPod, and that's it. And it really it comes off really well, I think.
And you've also got a residency in Chicago and then a new piece. I don't know, are those two connected, the residency and the piece?
Kind of. I'm doing a week residency at the School for the Art Institute in their sound department, and Lou Malozzi, the head of the sound department, kind of connected me with the Chicago Renaissance Center and asked if I would want to do a public concert at the end of the residency. And I have this new piece that I wrote for a duo in Tennessee called The Reinvention of Romance, that they had commissioned me to write them a very long piece. And I had always wanted to do a really long piece for two people. And so I was like, I kind of checked in with them and I was like, what do you mean by very long? and they basically said, go crazy. And so I didn't have like a target duration. I knew I wanted it to be more than an hour long, but I borrowed a cello from someone, and I just kind of the same way that I wrote the guitar piece that I have. Really, I don't play cello, but I know enough about the cello to make sound with it, and just I would mess around with it, and I wrote down any fragment that I liked, and almost all of them ended up being part of the piece, and then we kind of arranged them in order and wrote the percussion part at the same time. And it's the new thing that I'm most excited about doing, even though I'm not actually playing on it in Chicago. But I think I'm gonna play it myself in a couple cities. But it was commissioned for this duo called Two Way Street in Knoxville, Tennessee. So they're gonna come up and give the first performance of it. So I'm really excited about that.
I think I read in an interview that you did, I don't know how recently, but you were looking to do pieces that centered on the idea of intimacy. I think in that interview you perhaps spoke about the potential of having musicians that are like touching as they're playing or being incredibly close to each other. I mean, is this piece something that is kind of an outgrowth of that way of thinking, or that desire to do something based on the idea of intimacy?
Yeah, totally. And this is actually a sublimely perfect segue into one of the albums I chose to talk about.
I figured it might be, actually.
But we had my trio Meridian with Greg Stewart and Tim Feeney had this plan to do a piece for 6 musicians, the 3 of us plus 3 other people, and I was going to do it as this kind of like triple duo thing where each duo, like you say, was like really close together and maybe touching sometimes, and that it didn't end up working out that way, and that became kind of a different piece than I had intended. But I had always had this vision of like, 2 people just sharing space for a really, really long time. And I've been working a lot over the past few years with this music of kind of like repeating patterns that I feel like kind of a little bit mirror what it's like to, really, really spend a lot of time with someone that like really consists of mostly doing the same thing over and over again, waking up, going to work, eating a meal, taking the dogs for a walk, whatever. It's like most of your lives consist of doing things that you do, basically every day.
Yeah.
And so I got really into the idea of making pieces that kind of mirror that relationship. And that, because, I was in one very long relationship prior to the one that I'm in now, and I have the same feeling now with a different partner, that it's like the longer you spend with that person, I don't know. I think it was the opposite, unfortunately, for my ex. But I felt that the longer that I spent with someone, you know, kind of the more routine your lives become. But I didn't find that my interest or like love for that person was changing. That if anything, it's like the longer you spent with them, the more connected I felt.
Yeah.
And so I thought that would be a really, you know, kind of beautiful thing to do as, you know, a piece of music.
I mean, it's certainly something that, I mean, perhaps that's why I find it so resonant with myself, because it's a difficult thing to pinpoint, but also, as you say, as routine starts to ossify in the life with you and a partner, I think certainly for me, it's become more difficult to express to people on the outside what it is about that relationship which is so electrifying and what's so enjoyable, and it becomes
totally.
And that's certainly something I feel with repetitious music, where it's, you know, the novelty of the idea is gone, but suddenly something that's less immediately expressible is weaving itself into the state of listening.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like working with these concepts of like things that are hard to describe. That you know, a lot of my piece Contralto that I've talked about is that when you ask trans or gender nonconforming people to describe the experience of dysphoria, like no one can really do that.
Right.
No, you can, but you can't do it in a way that really communicates what that's actually like. And I feel like what you just said is pretty much the same kind of thing. It's like you spend 30 years with the same person. It's like, there's so much complexity in that relationship and like time and investment that like, how could you possibly like explain to someone what that feels like?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can like make something that sort of reflects that and shows it.
You mentioned that this topic of conversation makes a nice segue into your first record. I've got a feeling, if I've made the right connections here, I think I know what this is going to be, but I'll let you introduce it and tell me what your first important record is, Sarah.
It's the box set of the Belgian composer whose name I hope I'm pronouncing properly, Boudewijn Oosterlink.
Uh-huh.
And the reason that I say it's a perfect segue is that he has a piece called The Point and the Line that was the inspiration for a lot of the stuff that we were just talking about in terms of like me making my own music, and that the whole box set, as soon as I heard it, it was like finding treasure or something. It's like, you know, it's a dream. It's 4 CDs of music from the late 70s by a composer I've never heard of, who seems to have this totally unique, fully formed vision that I have never heard of before. Like it was like, it really was like discovering secret treasure or something. And but I got fixated on this one piece in particular called The Point in the Line, that is really, really simple, where it's just someone bowing on 2 of the strings inside of a piano, like kind of alternating between one note and then another. And then at some point I think he was making all these things himself, probably alone. And so it's all overdubbed, him recording himself, where he recorded this bowing part and then added on top of it just these single plucks of some kind of like weirdly dampened piano string. Mm-hmm. So it's like everything about it is recognizable as like, yes, this person is using a piano, but none of it sounds exactly like a piano either. There's like something a little off about the sounds. And strangely, the booklet that comes with the box set is just full of his diaries of writing about different pieces, and he doesn't really talk about this piece that much. Huh. But I don't know how he feels about it, but I kind of interpreted this as sort of, you know, the idea that in terms of love and like being with a person, that there's someone out there who's supposedly, you know, for you specifically, like the idea of the one, and that this piece doesn't really ascribe to that it feels like the sounds are almost interchangeable. Like you could replace the pluck with some other sound. Like you could stick any 2 things together, and if you play them with the right kind of focus, then like they will quote unquote sound right.
Right.
And that's what really the whole box set is like that. It's just full of stuff that doesn't make sense, but it just has this incredible power and ambiance and feeling to it, where everything just feels like perfectly placed, but not calculated or cerebral at all. It's if obviously I can't say that like I have a one favorite album of all time, but it is just about the best music I've ever heard. I talked about it in my wedding vows.
Wow.
Yeah, because I was trying to our vows weren't exactly like for richer or for poorer or whatever. We just kind of wrote nice things about each other, and that piece to me mirrors the kind of like utopian idea of two people being together.
In fact, I mean, this is really interesting that you took that approach to your vows, and this is more just personal intrigue. But did you tell each other what you were going to say before you got to the day, or was the first time you heard each other's vow like on that day?
We went to a cafe one day with the purpose of, we sat across from each other silently writing our vows, and then when we were done we switched computers and showed each other, and then we were both like weeping at the table. So we did a good job. And hers were pretty similar actually, but like with totally different subject matter, but it was kind of the same. But that's just one piece in 4 CDs of this box set, and it all has kind of a similar feel, but there's so much weird stuff on here. Like there's a piece called Suite for a Bondage Room, where in his diary he is basically like, yeah, somebody commissioned me to write them music to be played in their like S&M dungeon, but I really don't know anything about this stuff or have any interest in it. So like really talking about it like he doesn't even understand like the thing that he's writing the music for. And there's more than one track where he mentions that he was getting really into recording voices of mentally disabled people, and which sounds really problematic until you hear the music, and it's just I don't even know how to describe it. It's just the most. I remember when one of the times Michael Pizarro was in Austin, where I used to live, and he came on my radio show, and I had this piece called Refuge playing, and we were kind of chatting over the music, and finally after like 3 or 4 minutes, Michael just stopped mid-sentence and was like, "What are we listening to?" So yeah, it really just from start to finish, all 4 discs are just amazing.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up that Refuge piece, because I think that's an example of, for me, listening to it today, of that idea of something played with persistence until it feels coherent. Because certainly to begin with, I was like, gosh, this is a lot. But then everything felt like it was melding at around 6 minutes into something that felt like actually that all the parts were there for a very explicit purpose.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel, it's weird, but it doesn't feel like creepy exactly. It just feels kind of surreal or something that like it has its own logic. And that it really, not just the voices, but like all, and this is, I think, one of the reasons that I really identified with this thing. It just feels like he has this kind of deep love and attachment for the material that he's working with, which to me, repeating a sound over and over again, that's kind of, you're saying like, I love this sound, so I want to hear it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's, yeah.
And you mentioned that this record's kind of like buried treasure. I'm intrigued as to how you actually came across it in the first place.
I think I saw it. Oh, I remember. I got it. I'm still on it, but it's not such a thing anymore. But there's this BitTorrent site called IndieTorrents that an old friend of mine was one of the founders of, which is how I found out about this thing. But there was a good, 5 to 7 year run where it was like I didn't even need to go anywhere else to find out about music, because it was just this endless stream of weird, obscure records that were being stolen. But it was the kind of situation. It was a site where anything on a major label was not allowed on the site, both for curatorial and legal reasons. But it was just the perfect utopian version of file sharing, where it was like I never, not necessarily the Oosterling, but all kinds of stuff, where I was just like, I never in a million years would I have ever heard of this music had I not gotten it on this website.
Right, yeah.
And I think someone had uploaded it there, and I saw that it was a composer with a weird name, and the dates were like kind of a while ago, and so I was just kind of like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then I heard it and then immediately bought the thing. And that was how I heard it. But then I remember right around the same time I started Googling it, and I had seen that Keith Fullerton Whitman's Mimoroglu Music was selling it, and he said the same kind of like treasure comment, that he was like, oh, it's so rare to just have this like fully formed vision of a composer we've never heard of just dropped into our laps out of nowhere. And I mean, I'm sure people have heard of him, but I mean, he's still alive. I don't know. I remember I asked the label who put it out once what he's been up to, like how come there hasn't been any music since 1978, and they told me that he preferred to do things where he could have a direct like physical connection with the audience. So like he only wanted to present things where he could be in the room with the people experiencing them, so he stopped making recordings.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
so he's still doing shows then?
Yeah, he's still around. Like, I remember a few years ago, I've never asked him about this, but Jason Lescali, I posted to Facebook one day that he was playing a show with Oosterlink, and was really excited about it.
Wow.
So he's older, but he's not super old, I don't think, and seemingly still around. He has a website, but just kind of mysterious and seemingly not interested in kind of participating in any sort of like promotion of himself.
Yeah, which made my job tricky today, but
right.
But having the music in isolation actually, I think was interesting in itself, to just have this as the only point of connection with whoever this person was.
Right, and that's how I heard it too. It's you just press play on a thing you got off the internet that you literally know nothing about, and that is the last thing that I thought I was going to get is this music.
Yeah.
Like it's just unbelievable. I can't gush about it enough.
So let's move to your second record now, Sarah. If you give me the name of it and then also a little bit about why it's important to you as well.
It's Return Visit to Rock Mass by Mahershala Hashbaz. They're a Japanese group. And
what is it about this record that led you to pick it as one of your important records?
It's kind of similar to the Oosterlink, actually. It was another thing, I think around 2003, I saw on Soulseek, and I saw a band with a weird name with all Japanese song titles, and there was over 80 tracks on the album. And it's like, well, I have to hear this. and it's another thing that I almost can't even really explain why I like it so much, but it's totally different from Oosterlink, obviously. But Tori Kudo is the main artist in this group, although I think for a lot of the band's life, which I think started in the early 80s or maybe late 80s, it was always been kind of a collective, but it was sort of a core group for a while, and apparently that's not the case anymore. But Tori Kudo is the lead musician and songwriter, composer, and the group, when you hear their music, it kind of sounds like they haven't rehearsed or something. And a lot of people have called him a naivist, which I find like really stupid and condescending, because it's like, this person is so obviously like doing what they're doing very intentionally, and like sometimes it's very funny, but it's also like really, really great art, I think.
Yeah.
And it just, the idea that he's some kind of like naive outsider, I think is just like totally wrong. But I guess I haven't seen anyone saying that in a while. But anyway, Return Visit to Rock Mass is kind of, I think, widely considered to be their sort of like defining statement. It's a triple album with, like I said, like 80 something tracks on it, and most of them are under a minute long. And he himself has said a lot of times that he is intentionally allowing for mistakes in the music because that it mirrors our real life that way.
That's so nice.
And it's another one of these things that just really appeals to me because like it's very funny and playful, but the music is, if you can get past the fact that like, oh, they can't play their or they can't play these songs, that the music is actually really unusual. Like it's one of these things where, again, when I pressed play on it, it was like I've never heard anything that sounds even remotely like this in my life before. But unlike the Oosterlink, it's in a way kind of conventional music. Like it's often very pleasant sounding and very tuneful, but because of the way that it's played and the brevity of everything, it is its own kind of weird avant-garde music.
Yeah.
And I've had this quote on my Facebook page probably as long as I've been on Facebook, that is just Tori Kudo. When someone asked him what kind of musician he was, all he said was, "I am punk."
That's very good. Wow.
So one of my favorite albums of his that just got, I don't even think it got written about that much, but I saw a couple just brutal, really hateful reviews of this record called C'est la dernière chanson, that is 2 CDs with 183 tracks on it.
Wow.
And I saw one reviewer in particular was complaining that the silences between tracks were longer than most of the songs. And then, it sounds real, and it is really funny, but it's like, do you know anyone who's written 183 of anything?
Right.
And it's not composed music, or I'm sorry, it's not improvised music. It's music that he has written down. And like, I discovered not long ago that there's a tour DVD for this album, which obviously I bought, and it is unwatchable. It's the concerts are exactly like the album. He'll kind of look around and look at everybody and be like, "Okay, everybody ready?" And then they'll start and they'll go wah, 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 wah. And then it'll end, and then everyone turns their page, and then he's kind of like looking around, shuffling, like, "Everybody ready?" Like, "Okay, here we go." Wah, 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 wah. Like just on and on and on like that, but not delivered like comedy at all. And it's just another one of these things that just feels like it was like made specifically for me. and I really, I'm not that into like really goofy, silly music, but I really like if you can make something that's like kind of funny or playful and humorous, but also, it's still like really, really serious work. Like, you have to be really committed to what you're doing to make a 183 track album.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So it kind of, the volume of material gives it this sort of like, makes it harder to to write off as a joke.
Yes.
But I also like that the music is so pleasant, but has this ability to enrage people. So it's very sort of subtly subversive.
Yeah. I mean, even in terms of the concert that you described, I imagine when the pieces are that short, you don't know when to clap as an audience member, and that's quite disempowering, I guess, for some people.
Nobody was clapping. And that was part of it. It's just dead silent, and it's like a group getting ready to play like a long piece, and then it's like 5 seconds long.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, I read that a lot of isn't it people that have just been, I think it's like a lot of the time it's non-musicians and then people who've just got the music that day.
Yeah, I didn't know that actually. I was just on tour with Oren Ambarki and Chris Cole recently last month, and they told me that that Tori does not allow the musicians to see the sheet music until they're playing it. So it's like any question that it isn't planned or intentional is just like totally wrong.
Yeah.
And it's this, it's another thing that I've worked with a lot myself, and maybe I would have done these things if I had never heard Marshall Hashbaz, but I've made multiple pieces now where kind of an integral part of the piece is me not being able to do this, to actually physically execute the situation I've set up for myself. And then the piece is just kind of whatever happens. It's like me trying to do something that's obviously not doable. And it's like, it's just a totally different kind of music than you would get if you were doing something really tightly rehearsed.
And why does that appeal to you to explore as an idea?
I think similar to what Tori Kudo says, that it kind of mirrors real life, that like things aren't perfect in real life, and there are mistakes. And I like to set up these situations where there's just so much complexity to them that there's not, I don't necessarily mean musical complexity, but like musical or conceptual complexity, that you don't really know how to react to it. Because then you know the audience really has to start asking questions if they want to come to any kind of conclusion about what's happening. And if you do things that kind of go outside of the normal rules of music, then you're kind of automatically putting people in that situation.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I saw a film about Tori called, like, it's a 20-minute documentary called "This Is Our Music."
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's so nice. I didn't realize. So it mentioned that he's a ceramicist as well, which I thought was perfect.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy.
Yeah. Yeah, because he talks about the fact that he's not very good, but I love the idea of just with ceramics as well. You've got these indentations of failure that are permanently, then I don't know what the word is for ceramics. You know, heated, frozen, in time, and then suddenly that's it. You know, you have to live with those moments of failure.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like, it's not the same type of situation, but it's sort of like what I was saying about, you know, the long duo piece, that it's kind of a representation of something that, you know, is kind of universal. Like,
yeah,
in terms of things not being perfect, or having to sort of accept what's happening around you, because, you know, putting the sheet music people in front of people right before they have to play it is, you know, setting up a situation where you're not in control. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And with a record of this kind of duration, I mean, how are you listening to this when you listen to it?
I can't say that I don't remember the last time I just sat down and listened to the whole thing all at once. But I mean, I've been laughing for years that, like, if I put my iTunes on shuffle play, it's like 40% Maher and Ivor Cutler. That it's like every third song will be one of those two artists, because there's so many tracks on their albums. and I have, you know, many albums by both of those people. So it's kind of, you know, I have my favorite tracks, but it's, you know, it's sort of like my favorite supposedly more serious experimental music. It's not something I like put on all the time, or at least not Return Visit to Rock Mess. Like Blues du Jour is a nicer, like, you know, I'm cooking dinner record or something.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's more, it's album length, but, you know, there's a lot of music that I love deeply, but I'm not just casually putting it on.
Yes.
Which is definitely true of that K Records, you know, the one with 183 tracks.
Right.
It's like, yeah, it's not easy listening, even though it kind of seems like it should be.
So let's go to your final record now. If you can give me the name of it and a bit about why it's important as well.
Yeah, it's Anthony and the Johnsons' I Am a Bird Now. And I hesitated to pick this because I'm kind of worn out of talking about this topic. But as far as I know, it's the only, I'm sure I'm wrong, but it's the only prominent record I know of that's like explicitly singing about gender transition. And also just the format of that, it's these kind of mournful, sorrowful songs, just suits the subject matter perfectly. And it's just one of the most conventionally beautiful, elegant albums I've ever heard, where it's just the perfect match of like artist and material that I have ever heard. You know, the kind of thing that like young trans kids should be played.
Right. And can you remember when you first discovered it?
Yeah, I had become obsessed with them. I heard their first album because I'm a huge Baby D fan. Who I heard Baby D before I heard Anoni, and I had seen that D played harp on this other person's album, and I was like, oh, what's that? And this was before I Am a Bird Now had come out, so I got I Am a Bird Now like the day that it was released, and I was already really, really into the first album quite a lot, and then I heard I Am a Bird Now, and it's like totally next level. You know, everything feels more dialed in and more focused and less dramatic and more subtle. Like I just think it's a perfect album. It's like, I think it's about half an hour long, and it's over before you even realize it, and it just takes you through so many kind of twists and turns in such a short amount of time. But yeah, I got it when it came out, and I've written about this before too, but I just was like so obsessed with this album. Like I'm sure everyone around me was sick of me talking about it, because it was one of these things where just like everyone I knew, like, have you heard this, and they would just be like, we don't like this. And I remember even people, not in like a super mean way, but just people like making fun of how gay it was. Right. And it is extremely gay. Right. I remember that she had said in an interview that after Boy George came in and tracked his vocals for the song You Are My Sister, that Anoni had like cried for 2 days afterward, and a friend of mine was like, that's the gayest thing I've ever heard. Which sounds mean, but it's actually very sweet. Right, yeah.
I mean, so this is the first time I've heard this record, which surprised me a lot, because I remember it getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, it was a huge deal. I was really surprised.
Yeah, and I've been a massive Baby D fan for a while, and for some reason never circled back or, went over to Anthony and the Johnsons. So this has been... I haven't listened to this enough to really to be even talking about it, because it's the first listen was a lot. But I mean, do you have a favorite track on this record?
Not off the top of my head. I just feel like the whole thing is just such a like singular work, like as an album. Actually, Fistful of Love was the first song I heard, because that was the single,
right?
And I still really love that song. If I had to pick a favorite, and that's the kind of like groovy soul R&B song.
Is that the one with Lou Reed on it as well?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I never really understood. I mean, I get why he's there, but his part is not significant. There's all these like really, really famous guests throughout this whole album, and they're just like completely eclipsed by Anoni.
Right, yeah.
And I like this is gonna, I feel very cliched saying this, but I really like For Today I Am a Boy. And I remember reading an interview with her, and she was like, said that she was singing it as a joke, that it wasn't even a real song. And someone, people were like, you have to put that on your album, and she was like, I can't put this on an album, it's so silly. Right. And then she said it ended up being the track that seemingly endeared her to more people, that it was the most frequently people would come up to her and be like, I love that song. Right. So yeah, I guess those are my two favorite tracks. But it's funny, when I first heard this album, I was not really aware of my own situation at all, and it's very different listening to this now than it was 14 years ago, and it's a lot more sort of dense and nuanced for me lyrically than it used to be. It used to be this more sort of like, I wasn't really engaging so much with why I liked it. I just thought it was great music, because it is. Yeah. But and there are other things like that too, where it's like years later you can look back and be like, oh, that's why I did that. Right. Yeah. A lot of unexplainable things about your life become explainable.
And have you seen her live as well?
I have never seen her live, and I would really like to, but I think I kind of missed the prime Johnson's era that I would have wanted to see. It seems like she has kind of lost interest in the music industry, which makes a lot of sense to me. Because I just don't think you can become that big of a sensation and not get like kind of burned out, and it's like you can't just make I Am a Bird Now over and over again.
Right.
And I feel like that's why she made this switch to this more sort of electro pop's the wrong word, but you know, just a totally different style of music, because it's like she did kind of make I Am a Bird Now 3 times. Like that Crying Light and Swan Lights are like, they're very different albums, but they're all more or less in the same style.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people disagree with me. I know a lot of people, for them, The Crying Light is like their album, but for me, it's like I'm increasingly less interested in each successive album. But I love them all. I don't mean to say that they're like inferior or something. It's just, for me, I Am a Bird Now was like the one where it's like this person has clearly figured out the exact thing that they are supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it's even, I was just saying, when Mark Hollis died, and we were all very upset, but that I remember reading an interview with him from around the time that his solo album came out, and someone asked him why it took him 8 years to make another album after Laughingstock, and he said that Laughingstock was so close to how he imagined music that he didn't know how to do anything else. That like he didn't know how to move forward.
My word.
And so I always really, I wish we had gotten more music from him, but it's a really intense thing to say, and like to realize that you've done something like that.
Right.
where you're just straight up like, I cannot think of something better than this.
Yeah.
And I don't mean like he needed to get better, like he needed to do something that was more good or something, but that your imagination is just like perfectly encapsulated in this one thing is really amazing. And again, I love all of the Anoni records, but for me, I feel like there's this moment before I Am a Bird Now where you can hear this person kind of figuring out their thing, and then you get this album and it's just incredible, and then everything after that's like really, really good, but like kind of the same.
Right. Yeah. And so does that apply as well to I know she put out a record as Anoni, I think a couple of years back. Was that one that didn't quite strike a chord with you as well?
Yeah, I tried. It's just not my thing, and it's really, really good music. And my friend Leslie in town took her kid to see Anoni like playing that stuff, and they said that it was just astonishingly good, which I totally believe. But just the whole kind of palette of the music of just this kind of like really big bombastic electronic music is not like necessarily my thing, but I did listen to it several times, and it's a great album, but it's just not it's not my thing.
Yeah, no, fair.
For today I am a child. For today I am a boy. One day I'll grow up. I feel the power in me. One day I'll grow up. Of this I'm sure. One day I'll grow up. I'll know.
Well, Sarah, it's been so great to speak to you about these records and about what you've been up to as well. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and chatting with me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And if people want to keep up to speed with what you're doing, is there somewhere best for them to be headed online?
Probably my website, which is sarah-hennies.com.
Wicked. Okay, great. Well, thanks once again, and to everyone listening, I'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks a lot.